I stared at the bank notification on my phone screen. $50,000 transferred from our joint savings account. Robert hadn't mentioned any major purchases or investments. My stomach tightened as I scrolled through our transaction history, discovering 3 similar transfers over the past month. $200,000 gone. I took a measured breath and set my phone on my mahogany desk, face down. The gentle tick of my office clock counted the seconds as I composed myself. "Mrs. Ellis?" My assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Your 2:00 p.m. is here. Merger proposal for Artemis Pharmaceuticals." "Send them in, Naomi," I replied, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "And reschedule my 4:00 p.m. Something urgent has come up." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. As CEO of Helios Financial Group, I'd built a reputation for calm precision under pressure. Today would test those skills outside the boardroom. The irony wasn't lost on me. Robert handling our personal finances while I controlled billions in corporate assets. A traditional arrangement, he'd called it. Convenient was what I now realized it had been, for him. The merger meeting passed, in a blur of spreadsheets and projections. I nodded at appropriate intervals, asked pertinent questions, and shook hands firmly at its conclusion. Only Naomi, who'd been with me for 15 years, noticed something amiss. "Everything all right, Victoria?" she asked after closing my office door behind the departing executives. "Just a personal matter that needs attention," I replied, already pulling up the specialized financial tracking software I typically reserved for investigating corporate fraud. "Could you get me the personal files from my safe, please? The ones marked contingency?" 20 minutes later, I had my answer. Restaurant receipts from places we'd never visited together. Hotel charges in cities where Robert had claimed to be networking. A separate credit card I hadn't known existed, filled with jewelry purchases and designer boutique charges. The woman's name appeared in reservation details: Stephanie Laurent, 32, a real estate agent who'd sold us our vacation property in Aspen 3 years ago. I leaned back in my chair, a surprising calm settling over me. The betrayal wasn't the shock it might have been to someone less familiar with human nature. In my 20 years in finance, I'd seen countless examples of greed and deception. I'd just never expected to find it in my own home. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Naomi," I called through the intercom, "please cancel my meetings for the rest of the week. Family emergency." "Of course. Do you need anything else?" I paused, considering. "Yes. Contact Marcus in legal and have him prepare the documents we discussed last year, the ones we called Poseidon Protocol. Tell him it's urgent but needs absolute discretion." "Right away, Victoria." Robert and I had been married for 15 years. We'd met when I was already on the rise. At Helios, though not yet in the C-suite, he'd been charming, cultured, from a good family, a portfolio manager at a competing firm. He'd pursued me relentlessly, seeming to admire my ambition rather than feeling threatened by it. When we married, he'd suggested I keep my maiden name, Morgan, for professional purposes. "Victoria Ellis doesn't have the same commanding presence as Victoria Morgan," he'd said. Another convenience, I now realized. I opened my laptop and logged into our home security system, scrolling through footage from the past month. There she was, Stephanie Laurent, entering our home on days I traveled for business. Robert leading. Her upstairs, his hand on the small of her back. They'd used our bed. I closed the footage, making sure to save copies to my private server. Next came our household accounts: utilities, credit cards, mortgage, investments. On paper, Robert managed everything, giving me monthly summaries. It had been a relief. One less sphere to oversee while I built Helios into the financial powerhouse it had become. but appearances could be deceiving. What Robert didn't know, what no one knew except Naomi and my private legal team, was that I'd created a complex network of fail-safes years ago. Every account, every investment, every property had subtle protections built in, invisible unless you knew where to look. I hadn't done it out of suspicion, but out of the same careful planning that had made me successful. I'd seen too many powerful women lose everything through misplaced trust. My phone rang. Marcus from legal. "I've prepared the Poseidon documents, as requested," he said, his tone professional but concerned. "Are you certain about this timeline? Once initiated?" "I'm aware of the implications, Marcus," I interrupted gently. "Proceed as discussed. Authorization code Morgan 739 Alpha." "Understood. The preliminary phase will begin within the hour. You'll have full visibility through the secure portal." I ended the call and pulled up my calendar. Robert would be returning from his business trip to Chicago tomorrow evening. That gave me approximately 30 hours to prepare. The first notification arrived 15 minutes later. All credit cards associated with Robert's name had been quietly frozen. Transactions would still appear to process normally, but they would be internally flagged and held. The second notification followed shortly after. Our joint accounts were now under enhanced monitoring. Any withdrawal or transfer over $1,000 would require secondary authentication through my private phone. I opened my desk drawer and removed a single key. The safety deposit box it opened contained documents Robert had never seen. The true ownership, papers for our homes, vehicles, and investment portfolios. While he believed we shared everything equally, the reality was more complex. I'd structured our assets to appear jointly held while maintaining controlling interest through a series of trusts and holding companies. I hadn't done it out of malice or distrust. I'd done it because I'd watched my mother lose everything when my father left her for his secretary when I was 16. "Never depend completely on a man, Victoria," she'd told me afterwards, working 2 jobs to put me through college. "No matter how much you love him." As I drove home through the evening traffic, I considered my options. Confrontation, divorce, public humiliation. None held much appeal. In the corporate world, I'd learned that the most effective responses weren't emotional outbursts, but strategic maneuvers. Robert had made his move. Now it was my turn. Our house, a modernist mansion overlooking Lake Michigan, was silent when I arrived. I kicked off my heels in the marble foyer and poured myself 2 fingers of Macallan 25, a gift from a Japanese banking executive. I rarely drank alone, but tonight seemed appropriate for exceptions. I walked through each room slowly, seeing it with new eyes. The living room where we'd entertained colleagues and friends, Robert playing the devoted husband. The kitchen where we'd cooked together on Sunday mornings, planning our week. The bedroom where he'd brought another woman. My phone chimed with an update from my security team. Robert had checked out of his Chicago hotel and was currently at O'Hare. He'd changed his flight to return tonight instead of tomorrow. A hasty decision, out of character for my methodical husband. Had he been warned? Had the credit card decline at dinner sent him into a panic? I forwarded his flight information to my driver. "Pick up Mr. Ellis from O'Hare at 9:45 p.m. Take the scenic route home." Then I called Naomi. "Is everything prepared at the office?" "Yes. Conference room A is ready as requested. Marcus has the documents prepared, and IT has completed the system adjustments. The board members you requested will be arriving at 10 a.m. tomorrow. They've been told only that it's a sensitive matter requiring their immediate attention." "Perfect. And the other matter?" "Complete. The accounts have been restructured according to the Poseidon protocol. Mr. Ellis no longer has functional access, though the systems will appear normal to him until activated." I thanked her and ended the call, then sent one final message to Detective Sandra Martinez of the Financial Crimes Division. We'd worked together on several corporate fraud cases over the years, and she owed me a favor after I'd helped her sister secure a job at Helios. Need unofficial consultation tomorrow. Afternoon. Personal matter. Discretion required. Her response came quickly. For you. Anytime. 2 p.m. at the usual place? I confirmed and set my phone aside. The pieces were falling into place. Now I needed to handle the more immediate confrontation. Robert's unexpected early return. I heard his key in the lock at 11:17 p.m., the sound of his briefcase hitting the console table, his footsteps hesitating when he noticed the lights in the living room. Victoria? You're up late. His voice carried its usual confident timbre, but I detected a note of uncertainty. I remained seated in my leather armchair, not turning to greet him. How was Chicago, Robert? He entered my field of vision, impeccably dressed as always in a tailored Tom Ford suit, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled. At 48, he was still devastatingly handsome. I could understand the attraction, even if I couldn't forgive the betrayal. Productive, he replied, loosening his tie. The Westbrook account is finally settled. They've agreed to our terms on the property development financing. The lie came so smoothly, I almost admired his composure. The Westbrook account had been settled 3 months ago. I'd signed the final documents myself. That's strange, I said, taking a small sip of my whiskey. Because Charles Westbrook called me yesterday about the new project he wants us to finance. He mentioned how smoothly the last deal went, thanked me for taking his call personally since you've been so difficult to reach lately. A flicker of something, concern, calculation, crossed his face before his expression settled back into casual confidence. You know how these developers are, he said with a slight laugh. Always mixing up details. I was actually finalizing the Johnson portfolio. My mistake. I nodded, as if accepting his explanation. You must be tired. Long flight. Exhausted, he agreed, visibly relieved at my apparent acceptance. I think I'll head up. Coming to bed soon? Shortly. I have a few emails to finish. I watched him climb the stairs, noting the tension in his shoulders. He knew something was wrong but couldn't quite identify the threat. I gave him 15 minutes before following upstairs. He was in the shower when I entered our bedroom. His phone sat on the nightstand, face down. The temptation to check it was strong, but unnecessary. I already had access to his call and message history through our family plan, which I'd quietly upgraded with enhanced monitoring features years ago. Another precaution I'd taken without malicious intent, but with clear-eyed pragmatism. Instead, I opened his briefcase, finding nothing of note. His wallet yielded more interesting discoveries, receipts, from restaurants in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, not Chicago, a hotel keycard from the Grand Geneva Resort, a jewelry store receipt for a diamond bracelet totaling $12,650. I photographed each item before returning them exactly as I'd found them. When Robert emerged from the bathroom, I was sitting at my vanity, removing my makeup. I thought you were still downstairs, he said, a hint of alarm in his voice. Just finished my emails. I met his eyes in the mirror. You seem tense. Anything on your mind? He hesitated, then approached, placing his hands on my shoulders. Nothing. That can't wait until morning. Come to bed. I'm not tired yet, I replied, gently removing his hands. I think I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. Early meeting tomorrow. A flash of relief crossed his face. He didn't want to sleep beside me tonight any more than I wanted to sleep beside him. If you're sure, don't work too hard. I never do, I replied, watching him retreat to our bed. I just do what's necessary. I spent the night in the guest room, reviewing the Poseidon Protocol documents and preparing for the morning meeting. By 5 a.m., I'd finalized my strategy. By 6 a.m., I was dressed in my most imposing outfit, a charcoal Armani suit with subtle red pinstripes, Louboutin heels, and my grandmother's pearls. Armor for the battle ahead. Robert was still asleep when I left. I placed a note on the kitchen counter. Board meeting this morning. Dinner tonight at Le Bernardin, 7 p.m. Important to discuss our future. Car will pick you up at 6:30. At the office, everything proceeded with military precision. The board members arrived as scheduled, only those I trusted implicitly, 5. Out of the 12 total. Enough for a voting majority if needed. Thank you for coming on such short notice, I began, standing at the head of the conference table. What I'm about to share is sensitive and personal, but potentially impacts Helios's stability and reputation. I laid out the facts clinically. Robert's embezzlement from our personal accounts, his affair with Stephanie Laurent, and the potential risk to company assets if his behavior escalated. I presented bank statements, photographic evidence, and a detailed timeline of events. While this is primarily a personal matter, I concluded, there are corporate implications. Robert has appeared at company functions as my husband. He's met with clients in social settings. If this becomes public in an uncontrolled manner, it could affect market perception of Helios. Harold Winters, our longest-serving board member, and my earliest mentor, spoke first. What are you proposing, Victoria? 2 things. First, I'm formally disclosing this situation to prevent any appearance of impropriety. Second, I'm requesting a temporary recusal from any decisions that might be perceived as influenced by my personal circumstances. James Peterson, our CFO, leaned forward. And how do you intend to handle the personal aspect? That remains to be determined, I replied. But rest assured, it will be handled with the same discretion and effectiveness I bring to all challenges. The board's support was unanimous. By noon, I had official documentation of their confidence in my leadership, despite personal difficulties, protection against any potential accusations of emotional decision-making, and a clear separation between my marital issues and company operations. I spent the afternoon with Detective Martinez at a quiet cafe 6 blocks from the office. After reviewing the evidence I'd gathered, she offered both professional advice and personal sympathy. He's taken substantial sums from joint accounts, which complicates matters legally, she explained. While married couples typically have equal access to joint funds, his pattern of deception and the amount involved could potentially constitute financial abuse or even fraud, especially if he was planning to leave you financially vulnerable. And the other woman, Stephanie Laurent? If she knowingly accepted gifts purchased with your joint funds, there might be implications for her as well. But that would be harder to prove unless you can demonstrate she knew the source of the money. I nodded, considering. What would you do, Sandra? Not as a detective, but as a woman. She sipped her coffee, eyes thoughtful. Document everything. Secure your assets. Then decide if he's worth giving a second chance. Some marriages recover from infidelity. Few recover from financial betrayal combined with infidelity. That's a special kind of violation of trust. By 6 p.m., I was at Le Bernardin, seated at our usual table. I'd arranged everything meticulously. Private dining room, Robert's favorite wine, discreet security personnel positioned nearby. The stage was set for a conversation that would determine the future of our marriage. My phone buzzed with a notification from our home security system. Robert was leaving the house, dressed in his best suit. At the same moment, another alert. A failed attempt to transfer $100,000 from our investment account to an unknown offshore account. He was getting desperate. I smiled slightly, taking a sip of water. Let him come. Let him try to explain. Let him discover just how thoroughly I'd protected myself from precisely this scenario. The maitre d' approached my table. Mrs. Morgan, your husband has arrived. I straightened my shoulders and lifted my chin. Please show him in. As Robert walked toward me, his confident stride and practiced smile betrayed no hint of his deception or growing panic. But I knew better. I could see the tension around his eyes, the slightly too tight grip on his phone. He had no idea what awaited him. No idea that while he'd been playing his games, I'd been securing my position. No idea that the woman he'd underestimated for 15, Years was about to show him exactly who she was. "Victoria," he said, bending to kiss my cheek. "You look stunning tonight." I met his eyes, my expression carefully neutral. "Thank you, Robert. We have a lot to discuss." The waiter appeared with the wine I'd pre-ordered, a 1982 Chateau Lafite Rothschild, $9,800 per bottle. Robert's eyebrows rose slightly in surprise. "Special occasion?" he asked as the sommelier poured. "In a manner of speaking," I replied. "A turning point, certainly." As the waiter departed, Robert reached across the table for my hand. I allowed the contact, watching him carefully. "Victoria, there's something I need to tell you," he began, his expression shifting to one of practiced contrition. "I've made a serious mistake." Little did he know just how serious that mistake had been, or that the true reckoning was only beginning. The chess pieces were in position, the game was in motion, and I had been planning my endgame for far longer than he could possibly imagine. "A mistake," I repeated, my voice calm as I swirled the wine in my glass. "That's an interesting way to describe $200,000 and a diamond bracelet." Robert's carefully crafted expression of contrition faltered. His fingers tightened around mine briefly before he withdrew his hand. "You know," he said, "not a question, but a realization. Did you really think I wouldn't?" I took a measured sip of the Lafite Rothschild. "I built a financial empire from nothing, Robert. Did you imagine I wouldn't notice money disappearing from our accounts?" He reached for his wine glass, his usual grace momentarily abandoned as he nearly knocked it over. "I can explain. It's not what you think." "Stephanie Laurent," I said simply. "Lake Geneva, not Chicago. The Grand Geneva Resort. Room 718. You ordered the steak, she had the salmon. You drank a bottle of mediocre Cabernet because you were saving the real money for the bracelet from Tiffany's. $12,750. Did I miss anything important?" The color drained from his face. "Have you been having me followed?" "I didn't need to." I placed my phone on the table, open to our bank statements. "Financial forensics is what I do, Robert. It's how I built Helios. Following the money is second nature to me." He leaned back in his chair, reassessing me as if seeing me for the first time. The waiter approached with menus, but I waved him away with a polite request for privacy. "The transfers," Robert said once we were alone again. "I can put the money back. All of it. I was going to tell you about the investment opportunity." "Stop." I raised my hand. "We're well past that point now. I've seen the hotel charges, the restaurants, the jewelry. I've seen the security footage from our home, from our bedroom." His eyes widened. "You've been spying on me? On my own property? That's called security, Robert. A necessary precaution, as it turns out." He took a large swallow of wine, clearly recalculating his approach. Robert had always been adaptable, a quality I'd once admired in him. Now I watched dispassionately as he shifted. "Tactics. It was a mistake, Victoria. A midlife crisis. A momentary weakness. Stephanie doesn't mean anything to me. You're the one I love, the one I chose to build a life with. And yet you brought her into our home, into our bed." I kept my voice low, controlled. "That suggests a certain level of commitment to the arrangement." "It's over. I ended it last week." Another lie. The security footage from yesterday proved otherwise. I realized what I was risking, what I was throwing away. "What changed?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Why the sudden attack of conscience?" He hesitated, and I could almost see him sorting through potential responses, looking for the one I might believe. "I missed you," he finally said. "I realized that what we have, our life together, our history, it matters more than some fleeting excitement, an expensive epiphany." I opened the investment portfolio app on my phone, especially considering your attempted transfer this evening, $100,000 to an account in the Caymans. Were you missing me when you tried to move that Money, Robert? His eyes narrowed slightly. How did you— I declined the transfer, I interrupted. Just as I've frozen all our joint accounts pending resolution of this situation. Now real panic flashed across his handsome features. You can't do that. Those are joint accounts. I have equal rights to that money. Actually, I can, and I did. You've demonstrated financial behavior that puts our assets at risk. Any court would recognize my actions as reasonable precautions, not punitive measures. I leaned forward slightly. But we don't need to involve courts yet, do we? He took another drink, emptying his glass. I refilled it, watching him struggle to regain his composure. What do you want, Victoria? To punish me? To humiliate me? Just tell me what it will take to fix this. Fix, I repeated. An interesting choice of words, as if trust can be repaired like a broken appliance. I set my glass down. I want the truth, Robert. All of it. Then I'll decide what happens next. Something shifted in his expression. A hardening around the eyes, a tightening of the jaw. The mask of contrition was slipping, revealing glimpses of the real man beneath. The truth, he said, his voice taking on an edge I'd rarely heard. The truth is that I've spent 15 years living in your shadow. Victoria Morgan, financial prodigy. Victoria Morgan, youngest CEO in the industry. Everyone knows who you are. No one remembers the man standing beside you. So this was about your ego? I kept my tone neutral, though his words stung more than I'd expected. You betrayed our marriage because you felt overshadowed? You have no idea what it's like, he continued, bitterness seeping into his voice. Being introduced as Victoria Morgan's husband at every event, watching you make more in bonuses than I earned in a year, having other men look at me with pity because my wife is more successful than I am. I never pitied you, I said quietly. I respected you. I valued your opinion. I thought we were partners. He laughed, a harsh sound without humor. Partners? You've been making decisions unilaterally since day one. Even our prenup was non-negotiable. A prenup that protected your assets as well as mine, I reminded him. One that guaranteed you'd maintain your lifestyle even if we divorced. A lifestyle you controlled, he shot back. A house you chose, cars you purchased, vacations you planned. The attack surprised me. We'd discussed all those decisions together, or so I'd thought. Had he been resenting me all these years? Had I been blind to his growing resentment? Stephanie appreciates me, he continued, warming to his grievances. She looks up to me. She makes me feel like a man, not an accessory. And the money? I asked, refocusing the conversation. Was that about feeling like a man too? He had the grace to look momentarily ashamed. I needed to set up something for us, a nest egg. Us, I repeated. You and Stephanie. He didn't deny it. I was going to tell you, after I figured everything out. Figure what out exactly? How to leave your wife while taking half her assets. How to start a new life with your mistress funded by my hard work. Our assets, he corrected. Our money. That's how marriage works, Victoria. What's yours is mine. Legally. The waiter approached again, sensing tension. I ordered 2 appetizers to maintain appearances, then waited until we were alone once more. Is that what your attorney told you? I asked, watching him carefully. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. What makes you think I've spoken to an attorney? Because I know you, Robert. 15 years of marriage taught me your habits, your patterns of behavior. You wouldn't make a move like this without having your exit strategy planned. He didn't deny it. Instead, he leaned forward, his voice low and intent. It doesn't have to be ugly, Victoria. We can handle this like civilized people. An amicable divorce, a fair division of assets. You keep your company, your reputation intact. No messy public scandal. How considerate of you, I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. And what exactly would you consider a fair division? The, standard arrangement. 50% of all marital assets. The house in Aspen, one of the cars. My share of our investment portfolios. I couldn't help it. I laughed. The sound startled him. What's funny about that? He demanded. Robert, I said, regaining my composure. You've made a fundamental miscalculation. What are you talking about? I opened a secure folder on my phone and turned it toward him. On the screen was a document he'd never seen before, the actual ownership structure of our primary residence. This house isn't in both our names, I explained as he stared at the screen. It's owned by Morgan Holdings LLC, of which I am the sole proprietor. You've been living there with my permission, but you have no ownership stake. He grabbed the phone, scrolling through the document with increasing agitation. That's impossible. I signed the papers when we bought it. You signed an occupancy agreement that resembled ownership papers. A precaution I took after watching my mother lose everything in her divorce. I took the phone back gently. The Aspen property is similarly structured, as are the vehicles, the boats, and the art collection. That's fraud, he hissed, his face flushing with anger. You tricked me into signing those documents. No fraud involved. Every document was legally sound and clearly stated its purpose. That you didn't read them carefully is unfortunate, but not my legal responsibility. He reached for his wine, draining the glass again. The investment accounts, then. Those are definitely joint. My name is on them. I've been managing them for years. Managing, yes. Owning, no. I showed him another document. The investment. Portfolios are held by the Victoria Morgan Trust, with you named as an authorized manager but not a beneficiary. Again, completely legal and transparent if you'd ever bothered to read the documents you were signing. The color drained from his face as the reality of his situation began to sink in. The prenup guarantees you a settlement of $5 million in the event of divorce, I finished for him. A generous sum, but substantially less than the 50% you were counting on. That provision is clearly stated on page 3, paragraph 2. You signed it willingly, with your own attorney present. Robert's expression hardened. Your money was always more important to you than our marriage. On the contrary, I said, feeling a genuine pang of sadness. I valued our marriage enough to protect it from exactly this scenario. I didn't want either of us to stay together for financial reasons or fear financial ruin if we parted. I wanted our marriage to be based on love and choice every day. This isn't about love, he shot back. This is about control. It always has been. Perhaps, I conceded, but not in the way you think. I needed to know I'd never be as vulnerable as my mother was. That was about my issues, not about you. His phone pinged with a notification. He glanced at it, and I saw a flash of additional panic in his eyes. Problem? I asked mildly. My credit card was just declined, he said, his voice hollow. At the jewelry store where I was having your anniversary gift sized. Another lie. I knew exactly what store had tried to process his card, the same boutique where he'd purchased gifts for Stephanie before. A security precaution, I explained. Given the unusual spending patterns recently, the fraud prevention system flagged. Your cards. I can reinstate them, of course, once we've resolved our current situation. You're enjoying this, he accused. Watching me squirm. No, Robert, I'm not enjoying any of this. And that, at least, was completely true. Despite my calm exterior, my heart was breaking. 15 years of shared history, of building a life together, all undermined by his deception. I'm simply protecting what I've worked for. So what happens now? He asked, his voice flat. I considered him for a long moment. The waiter arrived with our appetizers, but neither of us moved to touch the food. That depends on you, I finally said. We have several options. I'm listening. Option 1. We proceed with divorce. You receive the settlement outlined in the prenup. $5 million. No further claims against my assets. You and Stephanie can begin your new life together, though perhaps with less financial cushion than you'd anticipated. His jaw tightened at the mention of her name. Option 2, I continued. We attempt reconciliation, counseling, transparency, a complete financial reset. You return to work at your firm rather than managing our personal investments. We rebuild trust slowly, with verification measures in place. And option 3? He asked, clearly not enthused by either alternative. We, separate legally but not publicly, maintain appearances for a defined period, say 1 year. During that time, you continue to live in the guest house on our property, attend necessary social functions as my husband, and refrain from any contact with Stephanie Laurent. In exchange, your settlement increases to $10 million, paid upon completion of the year and finalization of our divorce. A business arrangement, he said flatly. Precisely. I took a small bite of my untouched appetizer. I avoid the public scrutiny of a divorce during Helios's expansion phase. You secure a more substantial financial future. We both save face professionally. And if I refuse all 3 options? If I contest the prenup? Expose your little ownership shell game to the courts? I set down my fork. Then I release the evidence of your affair and financial impropriety to the press. Your firm, which values its reputation for ethical management, would likely terminate you immediately. The divorce would proceed regardless, with your settlement reduced to the minimum required by law due to the infidelity clause in our prenup, and I would pursue criminal charges for the unauthorized use of company property, specifically entertaining your mistress in our home, which is technically owned by a corporate entity. He stared at me, reassessing. You wouldn't. I built Helios by making difficult decisions when necessary, Robert. Don't confuse my preference for an amicable resolution with an unwillingness to protect myself. The restaurant continued its elegant dinner service around us, other patrons oblivious to the quiet dismantling of a marriage happening at our table. Robert remained silent for several minutes, processing his limited options. The $10 million, he finally said. Would it be placed in escrow? Or would I have to trust your word that you'll pay when the year is up? A reasonable question. Half would be placed in escrow immediately, the remainder transferred upon completion of the agreement. All legally documented, of course. He nodded, slowly, calculation replacing shock in his expression. And my living expenses during that year? Covered, within reason. You'd maintain your current credit card with a $20,000 monthly limit. The guest house would be yours exclusively. Your car lease would continue. What about my access to our social circle? My club memberships? Maintained, with the understanding that your behavior reflects on both of us. Any public indiscretions would void our agreement. He took a bread roll from the basket, tearing it apart without eating it. And I'd be expected to play the devoted husband at your corporate events? To stand beside you at charity galas pretending nothing has changed? Essentially, yes. We've both acted in professional settings for years, Robert. This would simply be a more deliberate performance. Another long silence fell between us. I watched him work through the scenario, weighing his limited options against his wounded pride. I need time to think about this, he finally said. Of course. 24 hours seems reasonable. I signaled for the check. Until then, your credit cards will remain active with a $5,000 daily limit. The freeze on the investment account stays in place, and I'll expect you to stay in the guest house beginning tonight. You've thought of everything, he said, a mixture of bitterness and reluctant admiration in his voice. It's what I do. I signed the check, noting the irony that I was paying for this disastrous dinner just as I'd paid for everything else in our marriage. A car will take you home. I have some matters to attend to at the office. At this hour? The Hong Kong markets are opening, I said, standing and gathering my purse. Life continues, Robert, even when personal relationships falter. He remained seated as I prepared to leave. Victoria, he said, stopping me. Was any of it real? Us, I mean. The question caught me off guard. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw beneath the anger and calculation a glimpse of genuine pain. I thought so, I answered honestly. I loved you, Robert. I still do in some ways. That's what makes this so difficult. Yet you never really trusted me, he observed. Not with the truth about your assets. Trust is complex, I replied. I trusted you with my heart, my body, my daily life. I didn't trust the legal system or the inherent vulnerability of marriage as an institution. There's a difference. He nodded, understanding if not accepting. 24 hours then. Yes. I'll expect your decision by this time tomorrow. I hesitated, then added, whatever you choose, Robert, I hope you find what you're looking for. As I walked out of the restaurant, my professional mask firmly in place, I felt the weight of 15 years pressing on my shoulders. The carefully constructed life we'd built together was crumbling, regardless of which option he chose. There would be no going back to what we had been, only forward into something new, whether together or apart. My driver opened the car door for me, his expression betraying nothing of the scene he must have witnessed through the restaurant windows. The office, Mrs. Morgan? He asked. Yes, James. And then home, much later. I settled into the back seat, already pulling up the Hong Kong market, reports on my tablet. I suspect it will be a long night. As the car pulled away from the curb, I caught a glimpse of Robert through the restaurant window, still sitting at our table, staring into his wine glass. For 15 years, I'd protected myself from financial vulnerability while leaving my heart entirely exposed. The irony wasn't lost on me. My phone rang, Naomi calling despite the late hour. Everything all right? She asked, her concern evident even through the professional tone. As well as can be expected, I replied. Has Marcus sent the separation? Agreement drafts? Yes, all 3 options as you requested. They're in your secure email. Perfect. Please ask IT to prepare a complete system separation for Robert's devices from our home network. And have security change the house access codes, exempting only the guest house entrance. Already done, she confirmed. And, Victoria, I'm sorry, I closed my eyes briefly, allowing myself a moment of genuine emotion. Thank you, Naomi. So am I. As the car navigated the evening traffic, I composed myself for the work ahead. Robert would make his choice, and we would move forward accordingly. I had protected my financial assets with methodical precision. My heart, unfortunately, had enjoyed no such safeguards. The Helios building loomed ahead, its upper floors still illuminated despite the late hour. Inside those walls, I was Victoria Morgan, CEO and financial strategist. There, at least, my identity remained intact, untouched by personal betrayal. I straightened my shoulders and gathered my things as the car pulled to the curb. Whatever emotional storms might be raging, I had a company to run and decisions to make. Vulnerability was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not tonight, and perhaps not ever again. The Helios executive floor was silent except for the gentle hum of the climate control system. At 1:15 a.m., I was alone among the glass-walled offices, the city lights creating a stunning backdrop through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I reviewed the separation agreement drafts Marcus had prepared, making minor adjustments to the language. My office phone lit up, the security desk. Mrs. Morgan, there's a Ms. Laurent here insisting on seeing you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite determined. Stephanie Laurent, here at my office in the middle of the night. The audacity was almost admirable. Send her up, please. And Stephen, make sure her visit is properly documented on the security log. Yes, ma'am. I closed the document on my screen and straightened my desk, taking the moment to center myself. So Robert had already contacted her, despite my surveillance. This complicated matters, but also provided an opportunity I hadn't anticipated. The elevator chimed, and moments later, Stephanie Laurent strode into my office without waiting for an invitation. She was younger than me, of course, 32, to my 45, with the kind of effortless beauty that came from youth and expensive maintenance. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves around a face carefully enhanced by subtle cosmetic procedures. In another life, I might have admired her polish. "Victoria Morgan," she said, stopping at the edge of my desk. "Finally we meet face to face." I remained seated, deliberately not offering her a chair. "Ms. Laurent, this is unexpected." "I'm sure it is." She placed her hands on my desk, leaning forward slightly. Her Cartier love bracelet slid down her wrist, a gift from Robert 6 months ago, purchased with our joint credit card. "Robert told me everything." "Did he?" I kept my tone mild, professional. "And what exactly did everything entail? Your ultimatum? Your threats? Your manipulative prenup?" Her green eyes flashed with genuine anger. "You've backed him into a corner, and I won't stand for it." I allowed myself a small smile. "Please, sit down, Ms. Laurent. Since you've made the effort to come here, we might as well have a proper conversation." She hesitated, then took one of the chairs facing my desk, crossing her legs in a practiced movement that displayed both her Louboutins and the toned calves above them. "Robert loves me," she stated, as if announcing an indisputable fact. "He's been unhappy with you for years." "So I've recently discovered." I opened a drawer and removed a slim file. What I find curious is the timing of his epiphany. According to my records, your relationship began in earnest approximately 11 months ago, shortly after Helios announced its acquisition of Meridian Capital. A flicker of surprise crossed her face. "Robert and I connected on a soul level. It has nothing to do with your company." "Perhaps," I conceded. "Yet your first encounter occurred 3 days after the acquisition was publicly announced, significantly increasing both Helios's market value and, by extension, the presumed value of Robert's marital assets." Her perfect features arranged themselves into an expression of offended dignity. "You're suggesting I pursued Robert for money?" "I'm observing a correlation, not necessarily causation." I opened the file. "But since you've raised the financial aspect, let's discuss it directly. The diamond bracelet you're wearing costs $12,750. The earrings you wore to the charity gala last month, $18,000. The weekend trips to Lake Geneva, approximately $40,000 in total. All funded by accounts I built." She touched the bracelet defensively. "What Robert chooses to give me is between us. Legally, that's incorrect. Gifts purchased with marital assets without the knowledge or consent of both parties can be classified as dissipation of marital property. In a divorce, you could be compelled to return them." Her confidence faltered for the first time. "That's ridiculous. They were gifts." "Gifts purchased with stolen funds, essentially." I closed the file. "But that's not why you're here tonight, is it? You didn't come to discuss legal technicalities about jewelry." She straightened her shoulders. "I came to tell you to stop manipulating. Robert, he wants to be with me, not you. Your financial strong-arming won't change that." "Have you considered," I asked carefully, "that Robert might have misrepresented his situation to you? That perhaps the future he promised isn't entirely within his power to deliver? He told me you'd try to turn me against him." Her chin lifted defiantly. "It won't work. We have plans." "Once the divorce is settled?" "There's the key phrase," I interrupted gently. "Once the divorce is settled? What exactly did Robert tell you about our financial arrangements?" She hesitated, calculation replacing indignation in her eyes. Could almost see her reassessing the conversation, wondering if she'd revealed too much. That's not your concern? She finally said. Let me guess, I continued, as if she hadn't spoken. He mentioned our substantial investment portfolios, the properties in Chicago, Aspen, Martha's Vineyard, the art collection. He promised you a comfortable future once he received his fair share in the divorce. Her silence was confirmation enough. Ms. Laurent, I don't begrudge you pursuing happiness, even at the expense of my marriage. But I do think you deserve the truth about what you're stepping into. I turned my monitor toward her, displaying the actual ownership structure of our primary residence. This is just one example of the financial reality Robert hasn't shared with you. She leaned forward, scanning the document with growing confusion. I don't understand. Robert said the house was jointly owned. He believed it was. He was mistaken. I swiped to the next document. As he was about the Aspen property, which I gather figured prominently in your future plans together. Her expression hardened. These could be fakes. You're trying to scare me off. A reasonable suspicion. I nodded appreciatively at her caution. You're welcome to have your own attorney verify everything I've shown you. The records are public, though admittedly buried beneath several layers of corporate entities. She stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Chicago's nightscape spread before her, glittering and vast. Why are you showing me this? To humiliate me? On the contrary. I joined her at the window, maintaining a respectful distance. I'm doing it because you deserve to make informed decisions about your future. Robert isn't the financial catch he's presented himself to be. It's not about money, she insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. Of course not, I agreed. But when passion fades, and it always does eventually, practical considerations remain. You're an intelligent woman building your own career. I respect that. I wouldn't want to see you derail your life for promises that can't be fulfilled. She turned to face me, her expression a complex mixture of anger, uncertainty, and calculation. What do you want from me? Nothing, I replied honestly. Your relationship with Robert is your business. I simply thought you should know exactly what you're getting and what you're not. And what about you? She challenged. What do you get out of this conversation? Clarity, resolution, the opportunity to move forward with all parties fully informed. I returned to my desk, gathering the separation agreements. Robert has 3 options for how we proceed. I suspect his choice may impact your plans together. She followed me, her composure somewhat recovered. What options? I outlined the 3 scenarios I'd presented to Robert. Divorce with the prenup, settlement, attempted reconciliation, or the year-long separation with increased settlement. Her expression grew increasingly troubled as I explained each one. A $5 million settlement, she repeated when I finished. Not 50% of your assets, correct? And that's only if he accepts the most financially advantageous option and fulfills his obligations under it. She sank back into the chair, absorbing the implications. He told me. She stopped herself. What did he tell you, Ms. Laurent? I prompted gently. She looked up, calculation replacing shock. Why should I tell you anything? You're trying to manipulate me just like you've manipulated him. I'm offering you information, not manipulation. What you do with it is entirely your choice. I checked my watch. It's nearly 2 a.m. I imagine you have a lot to think about, as do I. She stood, gathering her designer purse. Another gift from Robert, I noted. This isn't over. On that we agree, I replied. Though perhaps not in the way you imagine. After. She left. I remained at my desk for several minutes, processing the encounter. Robert had clearly misrepresented our financial situation to Stephanie, promising her a lifestyle funded by assets he didn't actually control. The question was whether her attachment to him would survive the reality check I'd just provided. My phone buzzed with a text from the security desk. Ms. Laurent has left the building. Mr. Ellis has arrived and is requesting access. Robert, following her here. The night was becoming increasingly theatrical. "Send him up," I texted back. Minutes later, Robert burst into my office, his composure completely abandoned. His tie was askew, his normally perfect hair disheveled. He'd been drinking since I left him at the restaurant. "What did you say to her?" He demanded without preamble. "Good evening to you too, Robert," I replied calmly. "I see you've spoken with Stephanie." "She's not answering my calls." He paced in front of my desk. "What did you do? Threaten her? Bribe her?" "I simply provided her with factual information about our financial arrangements. Information you should have shared with her yourself, if your relationship was as honest as you claim." He stopped pacing, his expression shifting from anger to a more calculated assessment. "You showed her the property documents. Among other things, I thought she deserved to know what she was getting into." "That wasn't your decision to make," he said, his voice low with barely controlled rage. "Perhaps not," I conceded. "But she came to my office, Robert, at nearly midnight. What did you expect me to do?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd seen countless times during our marriage. "I expected you to behave with dignity, not to sabotage what's left of my life." "Dignity," I repeated. "Like bringing your mistress into our marital bed? Like stealing from our joint accounts to fund your affair? That kind of dignity?" He had the grace to look momentarily ashamed before rallying. "I've made my decision about your options." "I'm listening." "None of the above," he said, straightening his shoulders. "I'm contesting the prenup. I'll argue it was signed under duress. I'll expose your shell companies, your financial manipulation. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person Victoria Morgan really is." I let his words hang in the air between us. "That would be unwise, Robert." "Why? Because you'll release evidence of my affair?" He laughed harshly. "Go ahead. It's worth it to finally break free from your control." "Not just the affair," I said quietly. "Though that would certainly damage your professional reputation at Winston Financial. They still maintain that old-fashioned morality clause, don't they?" His eyes narrowed. "What else do you think you have?" Opened another file on my computer. 3 years ago, you made a series of unusual investment recommendations to several of your high-net-worth clients, all involving Coastal Technologies, shortly before its acquisition by Telecom Inc. The color drained from his face. "That was completely legitimate. The SEC might disagree, especially given the phone calls between you and Marcus Layton, Coastal's CFO, in the weeks preceding those recommendations. Calls you made from our home phone, which I happen to have records of." "You're bluffing," he said, but uncertainty had replaced defiance in his voice. "Am I?" I turned the monitor toward him, displaying the phone records and the subsequent stock purchases. "I never mentioned this because I assumed you had a legitimate reason for the contact, that you'd done proper due diligence. But in light of recent revelations about your character, I have to wonder." He sank into the chair Stephanie had vacated. "You've been keeping files on me, all this time." "Not deliberately, no. But data is what I do, Robert. Information is power in my world. I collect it habitually, store it securely. I never expected to need it against you." The fight seemed to drain out of him suddenly. "What do you want, Victoria?" "Really?" I studied him. This man I'd shared my life with for 15 years. Despite everything, there was still a pang of something like grief for what we'd lost. "I want a clean break," I said finally. "I want to avoid the public mess of a contested divorce during Helios's expansion phase. I want you to accept the most generous offer you're going to get and move on with dignity." The year-long separation. He clarified. "Yes, you play the role of supportive husband in public for 12 months. You receive $10 million, 5 now, 5 when it's done. You sign ironclad confidentiality agreements. When the year is up, we divorce quietly, and you're free to pursue whatever life you choose." He was silent for a long moment, staring out at the city below. And Stephanie? Is not part of our agreement. What you do in private is your business, provided it remains private. But understand this. If there's even a hint of public impropriety during our arrangement, the deal is void. So I live in the guest house, attend your events, pretend nothing has changed, all while you control every aspect of my life for another year. You maintain your current lifestyle, your social standing, and walk away with significantly more than you're entitled to under the prenup. I'd hardly call that control. He turned back to me, something like resignation in his eyes. You really did think of everything, didn't you? I protected myself, I corrected, as any reasonable person would. And us? Our marriage? Was that just another asset to be strategically managed? The question cut deeper than I wanted to admit. No, Robert, that was real, at least for me. He laughed bitterly. Says the woman who hid the true ownership of our home. I protected my assets, I repeated, not my heart, that I gave to you completely, unwisely as it turns out. Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of the man I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. I did love you, Victoria, at the beginning. What changed? I asked, genuinely curious. He considered the question, perhaps honestly for the first time. I don't know exactly. Maybe I couldn't handle your success. Maybe I needed to feel essential, not auxiliary. Maybe I just got lost somewhere along the way. It was the first authentic thing he'd said all night. I felt a moment of connection across the wreckage of our marriage. For what it's worth, I said quietly. I never thought of you as auxiliary. You were my partner. My safe harbor in a demanding world. Until I wasn't, he finished. Until you chose not to be, I corrected gently. The silence between us was heavy. With 15 years of shared history, dinner parties and vacations, quiet Sunday mornings and elegant evenings out, all the accumulated moments that had built our life together. All now collapsing under the weight of his betrayal and my protective measures. I'll sign the separation agreement, he said finally. The year-long arrangement, $10 million. I nodded, relieved despite myself. A wise decision. Not wise. He countered. Necessary. You've left me no other viable option. I'll have Marcus draw up the final papers tomorrow. The escrow transfer can be completed within 48 hours. He stood, straightening his disheveled clothing. Is that all then? Business. Concluded? One more thing, I said, opening my desk drawer. I removed a small velvet box and placed it on the desk between us. Your 10th anniversary gift to me. The sapphire earrings you said reminded you of our first trip to Greece. He stared at the box, confusion crossing his features. What about them? They were fake, Robert. Lab-created sapphires in silver settings, not the natural stones and platinum you paid for, or rather, that I paid for through our joint account. He paled visibly. That's impossible. I purchased them from Cartwrights personally. Yes, you did. And then you returned them the next day, exchanged them for the fakes, and pocketed the difference. $12,000. I opened the box, revealing the earrings nestled in their velvet setting. I had them appraised last year when I was updating our insurance. The jeweler was quite apologetic about informing me of their actual value. Victoria, I never— Please, I interrupted, raising my hand. Let's not add more lies to the tally. I found the exchange receipt in your desk 6 months ago. I said nothing at the time because I couldn't imagine a reason you would need to steal from me. Now, of course, it makes perfect sense. He stood frozen, caught in a deception he couldn't talk his way out of. I'm not showing you this to be cruel, I continued. I'm establishing the pattern of behavior that has brought us to this point. This wasn't a momentary lapse, Robert. This was calculated, ongoing deception. He seemed to age before my eyes, the facade of the confident, successful man crumbling to reveal something smaller, more desperate beneath. "What do you want me to say?" he asked, his voice hollow. "That I'm sorry? That I made mistakes? Would it change anything?" "No," I admitted. "But honesty might be a good place to finally start." He sank back into the chair, the fight gone out of him. "I've been living beyond my means for years. My firm hasn't promoted me in 5 years. I've been passed over twice. Meanwhile, you keep rising, achieving, exceeding everyone's expectations. Do you have any idea what that's like? To watch your wife surpass you in every measurable way?" "You could have told me," I said softly. "We could have faced it together." "And admit failure to Victoria Morgan? The woman who's never failed at anything in her life?" He shook his head. "I couldn't bear your pity. I needed to feel successful on my own terms." "So you created a parallel life? With Stephanie?" "Yes." The admission seemed to cost him something. She looked up to me, admired me, made me feel like the man I used to believe I was. "And the money? Our savings?" He looked away. "Some of it went to gifts, trips, making the impression of success. The rest, investments that didn't pan out, trying to catch up, to build something of my own." I absorbed this, feeling a complex mixture of anger, pity, and grief. The man I'd married had been consumed by his own insecurities, his own need to match my success. And I, focused on my company and my financial safeguards, had missed the signs of his unraveling. "The separation agreement includes a non-disclosure clause," I said finally. "We will both maintain absolute silence about the true nature of our arrangement. The public narrative will be that we're working through normal marital challenges while maintaining our professional commitments." He nodded dully. "And after the year?" "A quiet, uncontested divorce. You'll receive the second payment. We'll issue a joint statement about growing apart and maintaining mutual respect. Standard procedure for high-profile separations. And then we never see each other again," he concluded. That would be the most likely outcome, yes. Something like genuine regret crossed his face. 15 years, reduced to a financial transaction. "The reduction wasn't my choice, Robert," I reminded him gently. "But the resolution can at least be civilized." He stood again, this time with the air of a man accepting his sentence. "I'll return to the house, pack what I need for the guest house." A reasonable plan. "The security codes for the main house will be changed by morning. Your access will be limited to the guest house and grounds." "Of course it will." A flash of the old bitterness surfaced briefly before he mastered himself. "Good night, Victoria." "Good night, Robert." After he left, I sat alone in my office, the emotional weight of the evening finally catching up with me. I'd handled the confrontations with Stephanie and Robert with the same precision I brought to corporate negotiations. I'd protected my assets, secured a workable resolution, contained potential damage to Helios's reputation. By any objective measure, I'd won. Yet, as I looked out at the Chicago skyline, victory felt hollow. The life I'd carefully built, marriage, home, future plans, had been revealed as partly illusory. Robert had been living a double life, motivated by insecurity and greed. I had been focused on financial protection while missing the emotional deterioration of our relationship. My phone buzzed with a text from Naomi. "Everything all right?" "Security notified me about the late-night visitors." "Handled," I texted back. "Robert has agreed to the arrangement. Have Marcus prepare the final papers for signing tomorrow. And Naomi? Thank you for your discretion through all of this." "Always," she replied simply. I gathered my things, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline of confrontation was fading, leaving only bone-deep weariness in its wake. Tomorrow would bring paperwork, practicalities, the beginning of our strange new arrangement. Tonight, I needed rest and the privacy to finally process the emotional reality of what had happened. As I rode the elevator down to the lobby, I recalled, something my mother had told me after my father left. The hardest part isn't losing them. It's realizing you never really had what you thought you did. The wisdom of those words resonated now as never before. I had protected myself financially from the fate my mother suffered, but I hadn't escaped the emotional devastation of betrayal. Some lessons, it seemed, each generation had to learn anew. My driver was waiting at the curb, his expression professionally blank despite the late hour. "Home, Mrs. Morgan?" I considered the question. Not the main house, where memories of 15 years of marriage permeated every room. Not the guest house, where Robert would be settling in with his bitterness and defeat. "The downtown apartment, please, James. I think I'll stay there for a few days." "Very good, ma'am." As the car pulled away from the Helios building, I leaned back against the leather seat and closed my eyes. One phase of my life was ending. What would replace it remained to be seen. But whatever came next, I would face it as I had faced everything else, with clear eyes, strategic thinking, and the hard-won knowledge that the only true security came from within. The city lights blurred outside the window as we drove through the late-night streets. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the execution of agreements, the beginning of the performance Robert and I would maintain for the next year. Tonight, however, I would allow myself this moment of private reckoning, with my marriage, my choices, and the complicated truth that victory and loss were sometimes impossible to distinguish from each other. 6 months into our arrangement, Robert and I had developed a carefully choreographed routine. In public, we were the power couple of Chicago's financial elite. He, the supportive husband with the perfect smile. I, the driven CEO expanding Helios's global reach. We attended charity galas, corporate functions, and social events with practiced ease, standing the appropriate distance apart, exchanging the expected pleasantries, performing our roles flawlessly. In private, we were polite strangers. Robert lived in the guest house, coming and going without crossing my path unless necessary. I remained in the main house, though I spent increasing amounts of time at my downtown apartment. Our text messages were brief, functional, scheduling information for upcoming events, necessary household matters. Nothing more. The separation agreement was functioning exactly as designed. Robert had received his initial $5 million, placed in various investment accounts under his sole control. His spending had stabilized, the extravagant purchases for Stephanie having ceased entirely. Whether their relationship continued in a more modest form, I neither knew nor inquired. As long as discretion was maintained, the details were irrelevant to our arrangement. On a crisp October morning, I was reviewing quarterly projections in my home office when Naomi called. "Robert's mother is on line 1, she said, an unusual note of concern in her voice. "She says it's urgent." Margaret Ellis had never approved of me. Too ambitious, too independent, not properly deferential to her precious son. Our interactions over 15 years had been cordial but cool. "Put her through," I said, bracing myself. "Victoria." Margaret's voice was tight with strain. "Have you seen Robert recently?" An odd question, given our living arrangement. "Not since Tuesday evening. We attended the symphony fundraiser together. Why do you ask?" "He's not answering his phone. He missed our weekly lunch yesterday without calling. It's not like him." A flicker of concern penetrated my professional calm. Whatever our current circumstances, Robert was unfailingly dutiful to his mother. "I'll check the guest house," I said, already rising from my desk. "I'll call you back shortly." I ended the call and walked quickly through the garden to the guest house. My security access still worked on the exterior door. "Robert?" I called, stepping into the foyer. No response. The living room was immaculate, showing no signs of recent use. The kitchen was similarly untouched, coffee maker cold, no dishes in the sink. I climbed the stairs to the bedroom, an odd sense of foreboding growing with each step. The bedroom was empty, the bed made with military precision. A quick check. of the closet revealed numerous empty hangers. His toiletries were gone from the bathroom. Back in the bedroom, I noticed a cream-colored envelope on the nightstand, my name written in Robert's distinctive handwriting. I opened it with steady hands, though my heart had begun beating faster. Victoria, bye. The time you read this, I will be gone. Not just from the house, but from Chicago. From this life we've been pretending still exists. I've realized something during these months of our arrangement. We're both exceptional actors, capable of convincing everyone, perhaps even ourselves, that we're maintaining a dignified pause in an otherwise successful partnership. But the truth, as you've always valued, is that we're performing in an elaborate fiction. I can't continue for another 6 months, not because the role is difficult, but because it's becoming too comfortable. The ease with which we deceive others frightens me. The efficiency of our arrangement depresses me. The slow death of whatever genuine feeling remained between us hollows me. You'll be relieved to know I'm not breaching our contract. I understand the legal implications and accept them fully. The second payment is forfeit, as stipulated in Clause 23B regarding premature termination of the agreement. I've instructed my attorney to send formal acknowledgement of this to Marcus as, for Stephanie, that ended 3 months ago. You were right about her interest waning when the financial prospects diminished. Another painful truth I needed to face. I'm returning to Boston, to my family's small property management business. My father always kept a position open for me, though I was too proud to consider it while climbing Chicago's financial ladder. There's a certain symmetry in returning to where I started, managing residential buildings instead of investment portfolios. Please, tell the necessary lie to explain my absence. A family emergency, a health retreat, whatever narrative best maintains your corporate stability. I trust your judgment on this, as with most things. Despite everything, I find myself grateful to you, Victoria. Not for the financial settlement, though it provides a comfortable cushion, but for never compromising who you are, for building safeguards that protected what you valued, for showing me that integrity, even when painful, is preferable to comfortable deception. I wish you continued success, both professionally and personally. You deserve someone who can stand beside you without resentment, who sees your strength as complimentary rather than threatening. I regret that I couldn't be that person. Goodbye, Robert. I sat on the edge of the bed, reading the letter twice more. The silence of the guest house pressed around me, emphasizing the finality of his departure. I should have felt relieved. The arrangement concluded without scandal, the potential for public messiness eliminated. Instead, I felt a complex mixture of emotions I hadn't anticipated. Respect for his decision, regret for what might have been, and a surprising sense of loss. I called Margaret back. Robert has left Chicago, I said without preamble. He's returning to Boston to work with his father. Her sharp intake of breath was audible. And you? Are you together? No, Margaret. Our marriage is over. Robert made that decision months ago, though we've been discreet about it. He's chosen to make a clean break now rather than later. The silence stretched between us. When she finally spoke, her voice carried an unexpected gentleness. He always did struggle with your success, you know. His father was the same way with me before I learned to hide my ambitions. The confession startled me. In 15 years, Margaret had never shared anything so personal. I didn't know, I said simply. No reason you would. We're from different generations, different worlds. I did what was expected, subordinated my dreams to his ego. You refused to do the same. I respected that about you, Victoria, though I never said so. Thank you, Margaret. The conversation had veered into unfamiliar territory. I'll have my assistant arrange for Robert's remaining personal items to be shipped to Boston. Yes, that would be best. She paused. Will there be a public announcement? Eventually. For now, we'll maintain the narrative that Robert is handling family business in Boston temporarily. After ending the call, I returned to the main house and contacted Marcus to verify Robert's legal communication. As expected, everything was in order. Robert had formally acknowledged forfeiting the second payment, releasing me from any further financial obligations. The agreement included his continued discretion regarding our arrangement, secured by substantial penalties for violation. By evening, I'd drafted the necessary internal communications for tomorrow. Robert's temporary absence, explained by his father's health concerns. My schedule adjusted to accommodate solo appearances at upcoming events, contingency plans for the inevitable gossip, despite our careful messaging. Alone in my home office, I poured a glass of the Macallan and studied Robert's letter again. His insight about our exceptional acting abilities struck me as particularly astute. We had indeed become comfortable in our performance, expertly maintaining the facade of a successful marriage while its foundation had crumbled. My phone buzzed with a text from Harold Winters, my mentor and senior board member. Heard rumors about Robert leaving town. Everything all right? News traveled fast in our circles, despite our precautions. Handling family matters in Boston, I replied. We'll brief you tomorrow. I moved to the living room windows, looking out over the lake. Chicago's skyline glittered against the night sky, a view Robert and I had once admired together. Now I stood alone, contemplating a future I hadn't planned for, at least not this soon. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting with my most trusted executives. Naomi had prepared detailed contingency plans for the various scenarios we might face in the coming weeks. Robert has returned to Boston permanently, I explained to the small group. Our marriage has ended, though we'll delay public announcement for several weeks to minimize disruption during the Asian expansion launch. Their expressions registered varying degrees of surprise and concern, but no one questioned the decision or timeline. After 15 years at Helios's helm, I'd earned their confidence in both professional and personal crises. The press release will emphasize mutual respect and privacy, Naomi continued, distributing the draft documents. We've prepared responses for all anticipated questions, focusing on the continued stability of Helios's leadership and strategy. And if speculation turns to financial matters? James Peterson, our CFO, asked carefully. All personal financial arrangements were resolved months ago, I replied. There will be no impact on company operations or stock value. The meeting progressed efficiently, each potential complication addressed and contained. By noon, we had a comprehensive strategy for managing the transition from married CEO to divorced CEO with minimal public drama. As the executives filed out, Harold lingered behind. At 72, he'd been my most consistent ally since I joined Helios as a hungry 25-year-old analyst. How are you, Victoria? Really? He asked when we were alone. I considered deflecting with my standard assurance, but Harold deserved honesty. Processing, I admitted. It's been a complicated few months. He nodded, settling into the chair across from me. I suspected something was wrong when I saw you and Robert at the Symphony fundraiser. The performance was flawless. Too flawless. I smiled slightly at his perception. We had an arrangement. He terminated it earlier than planned. And now? Now I continue building Helios, just as I've always done. I straightened the already perfectly aligned folders on my desk. Personal complications come and go. The work remains. Harold studied me with the penetrating gaze that had intimidated generations of financial analysts. The work always remains. Victoria. But so does the person doing it. Before I could respond, Naomi appeared at the door. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Detective Martinez is here to see you. She says it's urgent. Sandra Martinez entered, her professional demeanor showing cracks of genuine concern. Victoria, I need a moment of your time. Privately. Harold excused himself, and Sandra took his place, declining my offer of coffee. This is awkward, she began. But given our history, I wanted to come to you directly. We've received a complaint against Robert from a Stephanie Laurent. My pulse quickened, though my expression remained neutral. What kind of complaint? Financial fraud. She's alleging he obtained money from her under false pretenses, promising investment returns that never materialized. Approximately $150,000. I processed this unexpected development. When did this allegedly occur? Over the past 3 months. According to Ms. Laurent, Robert presented himself as having significant personal assets and investment expertise. She claims he convinced her to liquidate her savings for a guaranteed opportunity that appears to have been fictional. The timing aligned with Robert's financial settlement from our arrangement. He'd received $5 million 6 months ago, more than enough to fund legitimate investments. Why would he need to defraud Stephanie of her considerably smaller savings? I see, I said carefully. And you're informing me because we'll need to investigate his finances, which may overlap with yours given your marriage, and because I thought you deserved a heads up before we proceed. This could become public. I nodded, appreciating her discretion. Robert and I separated some time ago, though we've kept it private. He's currently in Boston. I have no information about his recent financial activities or his relationship with Ms. Laurent. Sandra studied me, likely trying to determine how much I already knew. This complaint could complicate your situation, particularly if it gains media attention. I understand. Please proceed as you must, Detective. My legal team will cooperate fully with any legitimate inquiries regarding joint finances during our marriage. After she left, I sat motionless, absorbing this new complication. Robert, with $5 million at his disposal, had apparently swindled Stephanie out of her savings. The pettiness and unnecessary risk of such a move was baffling. I called Marcus and briefed him on the situation, authorizing him to cooperate with the investigation while protecting Helios's interests. Then I did something I hadn't anticipated. I called Robert directly. To my surprise, he answered on the 3rd ring. "Victoria," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "I didn't expect to hear from you. Stephanie Laurent has filed fraud charges against you. Detective Martinez just left my office." A long silence followed. "I see," he finally said. "Did you take her money, Robert? After everything, after the settlement, did you steal from her too?" Another pause. "It's complicated. It always is with you," I observed. "What I can't understand is why. You had $5 million. Why risk criminal charges for a relatively small sum?" "Because it wasn't about the money," he admitted, his voice suddenly tired. "It was about control, about proving I could." The honesty was startling. "Proving what, exactly?" "That I could be the one in power, that I could manipulate the situation to my advantage." He sighed heavily. "After you showed her those documents, after she realized I wasn't the wealthy catch, she'd believed something changed. She started looking at me the way you did, like I was a disappointment, a fraud. I wanted to reverse that, to make her dependent on me." The admission was disturbing in its clarity. "So you took her savings?" "I created an investment opportunity that doesn't exist, promised returns that would never materialize, convinced her to liquidate everything." His voice had taken on a detached quality, as if he were describing someone else's actions. It was surprisingly easy. "You need to return her money, Robert, immediately." "I can't," he said simply. "It's gone. Bad investments, poor judgment, the familiar pattern repeating." I closed my eyes briefly, containing my disbelief. "The $5 million? Also mostly gone," he interrupted. "Turns out I'm not as financially savvy as I pretended to be all these years." The scale of his self-destruction was difficult to comprehend. "You're facing criminal charges, Robert. This isn't going away." I know. His acceptance was perhaps the most alarming part. "For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not just for this, but for everything. The affair, the theft, the years of pretending to be someone I wasn't. "I'll have Marcus contact Stephanie's attorney," I said, refusing to be drawn into the emotional aspects. "We'll arrange restitution to avoid criminal prosecution if possible." "Why would you do that?" he asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "Because a public fraud case involving my husband of 15 years would damage Helios. Because despite everything, I don't wish to see you in prison. Because ending this cleanly benefits everyone involved." Always the strategic thinker, he observed, without the bitterness that would have colored such a comment months ago. "Thank you, Victoria. I don't deserve your intervention." "No," I agreed. "You don't. But business is rarely about what people deserve." After ending the call, I immediately contacted Marcus again, authorizing him to approach Stephanie's attorney with a settlement offer. The money would come from my personal accounts, not Helios funds, a final expense to close this chapter completely. 3 weeks later, the matter was resolved. Stephanie accepted a settlement matching her full losses plus interest, signing a non-disclosure agreement in exchange. Robert provided a written confession that would be filed if he ever attempted similar schemes in the future. Detective Martinez closed the investigation, satisfied that restitution had been made and further criminal behavior deterred. The divorce was finalized quietly, with minimal publicity. The press release emphasized mutual respect and privacy, just as we'd planned. The business world accepted the narrative of an amicable separation after 15 years, attention quickly, returning to Helios's expansion plans rather than my personal life. Robert remained in Boston, working in his family's property management business. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd begun therapy, addressing the insecurities and need for validation that had driven his destructive behaviors. I wished him well, genuinely, though we maintained no direct contact. 1 year to the day after discovering Robert's betrayal, I stood in my office at Helios, looking out over the Chicago skyline. The Asian expansion was exceeding projections. Our stock had hit an all-time high. My professional life continued its upward trajectory, unimpeded by the personal earthquake I'd weathered. Naomi entered with the afternoon reports. "The Tokyo acquisition is finalized," she announced. "Board approval was unanimous." "Excellent. Schedule the announcement for morning trading hours tomorrow." She nodded, then hesitated. "There's something else. Harold suggested you might want to see this." She handed me a small newspaper clipping, not from a major publication, but from a Boston community paper. A small photo showed Robert standing with a group of smiling people outside a renovated apartment building. The caption read, "Ellis Property Management celebrates opening of affordable housing development for single mothers." Project head Robert Ellis credits program with finding purpose through helping others rebuild their lives. I studied the image. Robert looked different. Thinner, less polished, but somehow more genuine than I'd seen him in years. His smile reached his eyes in a way it hadn't during our final months together. "Interesting," I said, handing the clipping back to Naomi. "File it with the personal archives." After she left, I returned to the window, reflecting on the twisting path that had led to this moment. The betrayal that had shattered my marriage had also freed me from an arrangement that had been failing for longer than I'd been willing to admit. The protective measures I'd put in place had saved me from financial vulnerability, but couldn't shield my heart from the emotional impact of deception. Yet here I stood, still standing, still building, still moving forward. And somewhere in Boston, Robert was apparently doing the same, in a different way, on a different scale, but perhaps with more authenticity than he'd managed in years. The intercom buzzed. "Your 4 o'clock is here," Naomi announced. "The Westbrook development team." "Send them in," I replied, turning from the window. Business continued, as it always did. Life continued too, unfolding in directions I hadn't anticipated but was equipped to navigate. The lessons remained. Trust carefully, verify consistently, protect what matters most. And perhaps the most important lesson of all, true security comes not from controlling others, but from knowing your own worth, independent of anyone else's. Validation. I gathered my materials for the meeting, closing the chapter on Robert Ellis once and for all. The future, my future, awaited. Full of possibilities I was finally free to explore on my own terms. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.